On January 6 to 7, 2026, a diplomatic firestorm broke out over the Arctic after renewed public statements from the White House about the United States' intentions toward Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, and rising tensions with Canada over Arctic security. European leaders, including Denmark and NATO allies, responded sharply, insisting Greenland's future is up to its people and Denmark alone. Danish leadership warned that forcible control would threaten NATO itself. This matters because it signals a serious strain in relationships among long-standing allies at the same time that the Arctic's strategic importance, and competition over it, is increasing. Stay with this video because the facts undercut a lot of what's been claimed online. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. The Trump administration's renewed interest in Greenland. In the opening days of January 2026, President Donald Trump reignited a geopolitical debate that first emerged during his first term: the potential acquisition of Greenland by the United States. This time, however, the rhetoric escalated significantly. Trump and senior administration officials publicly discussed multiple pathways to bring the autonomous Danish territory under American control, ranging from diplomatic negotiations and an outright purchase offer to more provocative suggestions involving military options. Administration spokespeople framed Greenland as a critical asset for U.S. Arctic security, citing its strategic location along emerging shipping routes, its vast mineral resources including rare earth elements essential for modern technology, and its proximity to Russian military installations in the high north. The comments drew immediate international attention. Reuters and other major news organizations reported extensively on the administration's statements, noting that while the purchase idea had been floated before and dismissed as unrealistic, the explicit mention of military means represented a significant rhetorical escalation. Analysts observed that the timing coincided with growing great power competition in the Arctic, where melting sea ice has opened new opportunities for resource extraction, shipping, and military positioning. European and Danish pushback. The response from Copenhagen was swift and unequivocal. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen rejected any American claim to Greenland, emphasizing that the territory's future rested with its people and that Denmark would defend their right to self-determination. Frederiksen went further, warning that any attempt by the United States to forcibly take control of Greenland would effectively destroy the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Her statement underscored the profound tension between alliance solidarity and national sovereignty, two principles that normally reinforce each other but had suddenly come into direct conflict. Other European leaders echoed Denmark's position. Officials across the continent expressed concern that American rhetoric was undermining the trust essential to transatlantic cooperation. Some diplomats privately worried that even rhetorical threats against an allied nation's territory could embolden adversaries and fracture the unity that had defined NATO's response to Russian aggression in recent years. Canada's Arctic sovereignty and security posture. The controversy also drew attention to Canada's own Arctic policies. As the nation with the world's longest Arctic coastline, Canada has been steadily strengthening its presence in the region. Ottawa's Arctic and Northern Policy Framework emphasizes enhanced domain awareness through surveillance systems, secure communications infrastructure, and deeper collaboration with Indigenous communities who have inhabited these territories for millennia. Canadian officials have consistently stressed that sovereignty over the Arctic is non-negotiable while simultaneously reaffirming commitments to continental defense through NORAD and collective security through NATO. What the record does not show. Despite the genuine policy debates surrounding Arctic security, certain claims circulating online lack credible sourcing. There is no verified reporting that Canadian military officials have refused NATO command language or that Canada is constructing an isolated defense network wholly outside alliance systems. Responsible analysis requires distinguishing between documented policy positions and unsubstantiated speculation. The foundation of the modern international order rests on the principle that sovereign states possess exclusive authority over their territory and that this authority cannot be transferred without consent. Under international law, Greenland remains part of the Kingdom of Denmark, with its own autonomous government that exercises substantial self-rule over domestic affairs. The 2009 Self-Government Act granted Greenlanders the right to pursue independence through a democratic process should they choose, but that decision belongs to the Greenlandic people themselves, not to external powers regardless of their military or economic strength. When the Trump administration floated acquisition scenarios ranging from purchase to potential military action, it challenged this bedrock principle. Historically, territorial purchases between sovereign nations have occurred, The United States acquired Alaska from Russia in 1867 and the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803, but these transactions required willing sellers. Denmark has repeatedly and emphatically stated that Greenland is not for sale. More critically, any suggestion that military force might compel a transfer of sovereignty directly contradicts the United Nations Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity of any state. This norm emerged from the devastation of two world wars and represents one of the few near-universal principles in international relations: alliance integrity and the foundations of NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was constructed on a fundamental bargain. Member states agree to collective defense while respecting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Article 5 guarantees that an attack on one member constitutes an attack on all, but this commitment only functions when members trust that their allies will never become the source of such threats. NATO operates through consensus precisely because no single member, regardless of its size or power, should dictate terms to others. When an American president publicly contemplates acquiring territory belonging to a founding NATO member, it strikes at the heart of this arrangement. Denmark joined NATO in 1949 partly to secure protection against external threats. The suggestion that the alliance's most powerful member might itself pursue Danish territory creates a logical paradox that undermines the entire collective security framework. Prime Minister Fredriksen's warning that such action would end NATO reflects this reality. An alliance cannot survive when members threaten each other's sovereignty. The diplomatic response from European capitals demonstrated widespread recognition that allowing such rhetoric to pass unchallenged would erode the trust that makes collective defense possible. Territorial integrity and the limits of security cooperation. Security cooperation between allies involves sharing intelligence, coordinating military operations, hosting bases, and integrating command structures. What it explicitly does not involve is surrendering territorial control. The United States maintains military installations in numerous allied countries, including Thule Air Base in Greenland itself, but these arrangements exist through negotiated agreements that host nations can modify or terminate. The distinction between cooperation and control matters enormously, both legally and politically. European allies pushed back sharply against the Greenland rhetoric because they recognized that blurring this line would set a dangerous precedent. If strategic importance justified territorial claims, larger powers could rationalize acquiring any number of locations worldwide. The rules-based international order depends on even powerful nations accepting constraints on their behavior. When those constraints weaken, smaller states lose confidence that their sovereignty will be respected, potentially driving them toward alternative security arrangements or prompting destabilizing arms buildups. Why these norms matter. The principles at stake extend far beyond Greenland. National sovereignty, alliance integrity, and territorial respect form the scaffolding of international stability. Their erosion invites chaos, a world where might makes right and smaller nations exist only at the sufferance of larger ones. The controversy of early 2026 serves as a reminder that even long-standing allies must actively maintain the norms that enable cooperation, and that rhetoric dismissing these principles carries real consequences for global order. A decade of escalating Arctic activity. The diplomatic tensions surrounding Greenland in early 2026 did not emerge from a vacuum. For over a decade, the Arctic has been transforming from a frozen periphery into a zone of intensifying strategic competition. Climate change has accelerated this shift dramatically. Rising temperatures have opened seasonal shipping routes that were once impassable, exposed mineral deposits previously locked beneath ice, and created new areas for potential resource extraction including oil, natural gas, and rare earth elements essential for electronics and renewable energy technologies. Multiple governments have responded to these changes by expanding their military presence, reconnaissance capabilities, and infrastructure investments across the High North. Canada, the United States, Russia, Denmark, and Norway have all increased patrol activity, upgraded surveillance systems, and conducted exercises designed to demonstrate operational capacity in extreme cold weather conditions. Russia in particular has rebuilt Soviet-era bases along its northern coastline, established new military districts focused on Arctic operations, and developed specialized equipment for polar warfare. These moves have prompted corresponding responses from NATO members concerned about maintaining a credible deterrent posture in the region. The pattern is unmistakable. What journalists and policymakers once described as a region of cooperation governed by the Arctic Council has increasingly become contested strategic space where great powers jostle for position and influence. Canada's systematic defense modernization. Among Arctic nations, Canada occupies a unique position. Its northern coastline stretches across 3 oceans and includes the Northwest Passage, a waterway that could become a major international shipping route as ice coverage continues to decline. Ottawa has long asserted sovereignty over these waters, classifying them as internal rather than international, though the United States and other maritime powers have historically disputed this characterization. Recognizing both the opportunities and vulnerabilities inherent in its geography, Canada has been systematically updating its defense posture to address Arctic challenges. This effort encompasses multiple dimensions. The Canadian Armed Forces have invested in cold weather training, ice-capable patrol vessels, and forward operating locations that can support sustained operations in remote northern regions. Equally important has been the commitment to modernizing North American Aerospace Defense Command infrastructure. NORAD, the joint Canadian-American organization responsible for aerospace warning and control, relies on detection systems originally designed during the Cold War. Upgrading these capabilities to address modern threats including cruise missiles and hypersonic weapons has become a shared priority for both Ottawa and Washington. Beyond traditional military hardware, Canada has emphasized secure communications infrastructure capable of functioning in the harsh electromagnetic and physical environment of the Arctic. This includes investments in satellite connectivity, hardened data networks, and systems designed to maintain operational awareness across vast and sparsely populated territories. Indigenous communities play an essential role in these efforts, providing local knowledge, serving in the Canadian Rangers, and participating in surveillance activities that extend government presence into areas where maintaining permanent installations would be impractical. Pattern recognition, strategic trend, not isolated incident. Viewing the Greenland controversy through this broader lens reveals it as one manifestation of a longer-term strategic trend rather than an aberrant episode. The Arctic has been drawing increased attention from policymakers, military planners, and resource extraction industries for years. Climate projections suggest this attention will only intensify as ice continues to recede and previously inaccessible areas become navigable and exploitable. Several factors distinguish Arctic competition from other theaters of strategic rivalry. The extreme environment imposes unique operational constraints that favor nations with specialized capabilities and local experience. International legal frameworks governing the region remain partially unsettled, creating ambiguity that states may seek to exploit. And the relatively small number of Arctic nations means that bilateral relationships carry outsized significance. Cooperation or conflict between any two can reshape regional dynamics substantially. Looking forward without speculation. Understanding these verified trends provides essential context for interpreting current events without venturing into unfounded speculation. Governments are responding to genuine changes in geography and accessibility. Their investments reflect calculated assessments of future strategic requirements. Whether these preparations lead toward managed competition or dangerous escalation depends on choices yet to be made, choices that will shape the Arctic and international security for generations to come. Expanded analysis. Current developments and the evolving Arctic security landscape. Diplomatic fractures within the Western Alliance. The early weeks of 2026 have witnessed unusual strain among traditional allies over questions that strike at the heart of the transatlantic relationship. European leaders responded to American rhetoric about Greenland with a firmness rarely directed at Washington. Beyond Denmark's immediate rejection, officials across the European Union and within NATO structures emphasized that sovereignty protections are not negotiable, not even among friends. The Guardian and other outlets documented these exchanges, capturing a moment when Allied governments felt compelled to publicly remind the United States that the post-war order it helped construct rests on principles that apply universally. This diplomatic tension carries implications beyond the immediate controversy. Alliance relationships depend on accumulated trust built through decades of cooperation, shared sacrifice, and mutual restraint. When that trust comes under pressure, the effects ripple outward. European defense planners must now factor in scenarios they previously considered unthinkable. Smaller NATO members watch how Denmark's concerns are addressed, drawing conclusions about their own security guarantees. And adversaries observe these fractures with interest, calculating whether alliance solidarity might prove more fragile than previously assumed. The situation remains fluid. Diplomatic channels continue functioning, and officials on both sides of the Atlantic have emphasized their commitment to working through disagreements. But the public nature of the dispute has already altered perceptions in ways that cannot be easily undone. Canada's sovereign Arctic posture. Amid these tensions, Canada has maintained consistent messaging about its northern territories. Ottawa's Arctic policy documents, developed over multiple administrations, articulate a vision of Canadian sovereignty that does not depend on external validation. The government asserts full authority over its Arctic lands, waters, and resources while acknowledging the importance of international cooperation on shared challenges like environmental protection, search and rescue, and Indigenous rights. This posture reflects both principle and pragmatism. Canadians across the political spectrum view Arctic sovereignty as fundamental to national identity. The vast northern territories represent not merely strategic assets but an integral part of what Canada is. At the same time, Ottawa recognizes that effective Arctic governance requires collaboration. Climate change, pollution, and shipping regulation demand coordinated responses that no single nation can provide alone. Canada therefore pursues sovereignty and cooperation simultaneously, asserting authority while engaging constructively with neighbors and international institutions. Recent policy statements have reinforced this approach. Canadian officials continue emphasizing investments in domain awareness, Indigenous partnerships, and infrastructure development that extend effective control throughout the North. These efforts proceed according to timelines established before the current controversy erupted, demonstrating that Canadian Arctic policy responds to long-standing strategic assessments rather than momentary political pressures. Intensifying competition across the Arctic. Beyond the specific Greenland dispute, broader dynamics continue reshaping the Arctic security environment. Multiple nations with territorial claims or strategic interests in the region are expanding their capabilities and presence. Infrastructure investments include ports, airfields, communications networks, and research stations that serve both civilian and military purposes. Surveillance activities have increased as governments seek comprehensive awareness of movements through their claimed territories and adjacent international waters. Military exercises have grown more frequent and complex. Nations are testing their ability to operate in extreme conditions, sustain logistics over vast distances, and coordinate with allies in scenarios specific to polar environments. These activities reflect genuine security concerns. The Arctic presents unique challenges that require specialized training and equipment, but they also signal resolve and capability to potential competitors. Watching the institutions. Experts and policymakers are closely monitoring how current tensions affect established cooperation mechanisms. NORAD represents the most integrated bilateral defense arrangement between Canada and the United States, with shared command structures and joint operations that have functioned for decades. Whether political disagreements over Arctic policy might complicate this cooperation remains an open question. Similarly, NATO has been developing its own Arctic initiatives as member states recognize the region's growing strategic importance. The alliance's ability to coordinate effectively depends partly on resolving internal disputes about sovereignty and acceptable conduct among members. These institutional questions lack immediate answers. Outcomes depend on decisions not yet made, negotiations not yet concluded, and events not yet occurred. What remains clear is that the Arctic has emerged as a defining arena for 21st-century geopolitics, and how nations navigate its challenges will shape international relations for decades to come. Here's the clear takeaway. Alliances depend on predictable respect for sovereignty and shared rules. When one partner openly entertains overriding another's territory, even hypothetically, it erodes trust, even before any action is taken. That matters for security cooperation everywhere, not just the Arctic. If you value calm, fact-rooted breakdowns that cut through noise, subscribe.